to Film Asterisk. Happy sequel week. It is 2/22 yet again, and I thought it'd be kind of funny to do another 2/22 tier list where we talk about 22 sequels, 22 second editions of a film series. If you remember last year, we talked about 22 twos, and well, this year I rustled up another 22. And quickly, parameters for this episode for movies that qualify: they have to be the second film of a film series in some way, and they have to have 2 in the name. Those are the rules. We have 22 fantastic sequels. Well, some of them are fantastic, but we will get into that. Let's do it. First up, Scream 2. This is one I watched last night. Now, as people who know this show may know, I have semi-controversial thoughts on the first Scream movie. I really happen to hate it a lot. The whole premise of that is I stand on this fact that the opening scene of the 1996 Scream, the original one, is one of those amazing opening scenes of cinema, and the film slowly goes on to betray me in a way like no other. Let's stick to Scream 2, the sequel, moving on, which actually came out like the following year. It was a very quick turnaround. I mean, it has many of the issues as the first one. A lot of self-referential meta dialogue, which is like, that's what the movies are known for, but I think it just does it in a really unappealing way. Yeah. But when it comes to being a sequel, I think it's actually not terrible. I'm going to go with not so good, boy. I'm going to go right there because I don't like this movie at all, but as for a sequel, I think, it's not a great film, but it's a pretty all right sequel. I think it does stick to what people might expect to get from a sequel from 1996's Scream. I think it is pretty cohesive in that sense. I'll give it that. I will give it that. Next up, Ghostbusters 2. I watched this a couple weeks ago. It came a couple years later, and I don't think it was received too well in the public, because it was part of a lot of those 80s blockbusters that were getting a sequel, and I don't think a lot of people put faith in this one, at least in the public, in the critical reception. So I don't think it's that bad, honestly. I think it had some good jokes. I think it's a good boy. I think it's just as good as the first one. This is coming from someone who's not a huge fan of them to begin with, but they still have their moments. They're kind of funny. Moving on, Grizzly 2, Revenge. Another god-awful movie. Oh, no. This movie is a famously unfinished film. Production wrapped on it before they finished the film. They just shut down production. It was over, but it was released in 2020 after being shot in like the early 80s, and they just added some extra scenes to wrap the film up, essentially. It's this digital like drone shot footage, like stock footage mixed with like this 35 millimeter film from back in the early 80s, and it's very jarring and it makes no sense. I've never seen a film like it, nor have I seen the first Grizzly film, so I don't really know. I mean, I'll give it a not so good boy. It's a terrible movie. However, if I would recommend watching the first 6 minutes of it, because there are 3 actors who are only in the first 6 minutes. They're like in the cold open of, we're going to get attacked by this bear. We're 3 teenage campers who are just going around doing whatever. And the cast is like, it's a legendary status of 3 actors way before they were about to get famous. But anyways, very cool to see them doing things. Moving on, Horrible Bosses 2. I watched this back to back with the first one this fall. Just wondering, I like Charlie Day. And Bateman's really good in Game Night, and this one has Chris Pine, Christoph Waltz, a good cast in a kind of a bad comedy. it's maybe not my style of comedy, honestly. I'm gonna put as a not so. Oh no, I'm starting so poorly on this tier list. I feel like the last one was more optimistic, but yeah, not so good boy. Moving on. to Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Yeah, average. If we're talking about the greater sphere of the Guillermo del Toro verse, I think he does a lot of what he did in the first Hellboy, and then I think he goes on to do he adds some extra stuff to it. I think there's some really fun set pieces. I don't think the story makes a lot of sense, but that's okay. I think it's just a fun, average action movie, and we're kind of in like the superhero portion of the tier list now. So prepare yourself for one I can't believe I didn't do last time, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I went back and I was like, did I not do this one in the first one? I checked the end of the video and it wasn't there. So Guardians, good sequel. I think it did some different stuff. I think Kurt Russell was great. I think it wasn't afraid to be its own movie. I think it could have easily done the same structure of other sequels in the Marvel universe of that ilk, where they just start bringing in other like other Avengers, essentially bringing in other characters that we already know to just kind of be in the movie as a bit of like a box office draw. Like Nick Fury probably would have been in Guardians Volume 2, given a different direction. Or like that's the movie where they would have gone to Earth. We don't know. But no, they just did another adventure in space. Chris Pratt goes to find his dad. It's kind of cool. You get a lot of really interesting just character plot development things. A surprisingly good sequel in the MCU, especially in the later era MCU when you're nearing Infinity War and Endgame. I appreciate it. Moving on. Good boy. Iron Man 2, probably tied for my least favorite MCU movie. That's not a hot take. Everyone knows that thing is a bit of a mess, kind of weird. I haven't watched it in a while though, but I would give it a not so good boy mostly just because I love the first Iron Man so much. I mean, that came out when I was 8 and being 8 years old watching that just blows your mind. You're like, "Oh my God." And then I heard that they were doing another one, and I was like, no way. We're getting another Iron Man movie. This is going to be awesome. And then I go to the theaters. I'm all excited. And even when I was like 10 or 11, I walk out, and I'm like, that wasn't that good. That wasn't the same. And yeah, I think this just naturally falls into one of the major sequel pitfalls that we see in most sequels, and that is the fact that a lot of sequels all developed quickly to capitalize on the popularity of the original, and they have a usually bigger budget because the studio has faith in the property that is going to get its return back. So sometimes that leads to some bigger spectacles that are less well executed, maybe a rushed storyline. There's always little cracks in the framework of the film that tend to come out in a sequel. That can be the issue. I just got a text from Connor. I'm visiting him for the Andes soon. Haha, that's exciting. Stay tuned for the Andes. The next one, Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is the second Andrew Garfield one. I don't really like it, but as far as the sequel goes, average boy. It's an average boy. I happen to think it's just as good as the first one. And both of them aren't that interesting to me. Man, we are really just living in that middle section of that. We just got good, average, not good. I'm sorry. Here's the thing about Spider-Man. I was never a fan of Spider-Man growing up. I've never liked any of the Spider-Man movies other than, I guess, Spider-Verse, which came out 2018 or 2019. It helps when you don't grow up on things, when you don't have that youth connection, being like, oh, I loved this as a kid. Tobey Maguire, I think, fit the role best, and Tom Holland is in the best movies, but Andrew Garfield is the best actor to have, like, just technically, I feel like he has the acting chops that are more engaging than Tobey Maguire or Tom Holland. So you always get something from each franchise, each version of Spider-Man that is better than the other two, but you never get one that has just all the strengths. A really good actor with that actually fits the role of Peter Parker and also is in a really good movie. I like watching Andrew Garfield act. Moving on. We are exiting kind of the superhero portion of the tier list. We're going on to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Average boy. We kind of didn't need this. You know, the first one was fun, but it's nice to see more Bill Hader. It's nice to see more of this universe after the food's taken over the island, and there's just some fun speculation on what would happen. It's a sci-fi animated film, really, but it's very kind of grounded because it's on Earth. Mission Impossible 2. Or should I say Mission Impossible Woo? Because John Woo, man, this is his biggest box office success after Face Off. This is one of his last really big Hollywood hits. Well, it was a hit. It was the highest box office draw of that year. But man, this thing is so 2000s. There's a lot I respect about the film because there was a lot of pressure on Tom Cruise, who really put this franchise on his shoulders. Like, this is his baby. There's a lot of pressure on him, and this kind of affected the set to make a really good sequel, so they would go on and be able to make more and more, because these are the movies where Tom Cruise kind of gets to do what he wants. He gets to, like, free solo on a Utah cliff with no safety restraints underneath. He gets to do stunts. He gets to ride a motorcycle and flip off it and punch people and blow things up. Like this, because people will pay to see that in this franchise. He can't just up and do a different property. This is the one. So Mission Impossible 2, as much as it was kind of a mess and a very, very 2000 movie, you got to respect that it is kind of the movie that proved that this franchise was viable, and we would go on to get Ghost Protocol and Fallout, 2 fantastic Mission Impossible movies. Granted, I haven't seen 3 and 5, but I really like 4 and 6. So I gotta give it props overall as a sequel. Average boy. John Woo, man. John Woo and those doves. Moving on, we're halfway through. We got Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. This is our first terrible boy, I suppose. Yeah, man. Here's the thing. I feel like I did most of my favorite sequels in the first video, so I'm just dredging up more of them, and I'm like, well, these were the ones I didn't want to talk about. But they're still worthy of discussing. Episode 2 is a mess. I don't think it has kind of the charm of Episode 1, and Episode 1 has a little bit of charm. I like the story of Episode 1. It's not Episode 3, and at least Episode 3 has some slightly improved VFX and CGI. It's right in the middle of bad VFX and not good story. For a lot of like hardcore original trilogy Star Wars fans, the prequels felt like a bit of a betrayal of sorts, especially because they were all directed by George Lucas, and that's fair. That is a fair assessment of those movies. But yeah, I truly feel like it wasn't a true betrayal until Episode 2. I think Episode 1 was weird, but it was going for something. And then Episode 2 doubled down on everything that wasn't great about Episode 1. Particularly the politics and the talking and how everyone's just living in a green screen world that looks so fake. It's, yeah. So moving on to the second half of our tier list, we got 11 movies left of this 222 sequel week tier list, and we're starting to get into some of the ones that technically apply to this list, but I had to stretch the rules. First off, we got Star Trek Into Darkness, because words. This is a really, really good boy. I love the first one. I love the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek, and the second one, I think, really does a great job of building off of that momentum, building off of the chemistry of that cast, and then adding a really fun take on the original Khan villain of the original series and getting Benedict Cumberbatch to do it. Cool. Plus, I think it has enough fun callbacks to just the universe of Star Trek to begin with that it just makes a really fun watch. And, yeah, really, really good boy. Fantasia 2000, because it's got it too. Anyways, this is probably a perfect boy. I if you've seen my animated tier list, you know that this is a perfect boy for an animated film, and I think it's a perfect sequel as well because there is something about the original Fantasia. It was always meant to be remade every 20 years with a new set of classical songs to animate short films to, essentially. And it was a really cool idea. I loved that. And that we never got Fantasia in the 60s or 80s, but we got Fantasia 2000. And as far as the sequel goes, it improves on the music, it improves on the visuals, and it's just this beautiful display of classical music and animation. It's some of the best stuff that Disney and modern classical music have to offer, just put all together. And it's got these fun little cutscenes in between that kind of tie the film together, where you're just kind of hanging out in the room with the orchestra playing the music. And yeah, it's just really fun. That ending, I can't help but like fall apart at that ending. I believe that's Firebird Suite. Oh, Blade Runner 2049, because there's a 2 in the year. This is. Do I love this movie? Yeah, it's really good. It is quite good. It's the one Villeneuve does before Dune and right after Arrival. And I didn't like the original Blade Runner. Sadly, it was really slow and boring for me. I think if I was older, if I was there when it came out, I think it would have blown my mind. Sadly, yeah, I don't think it's for me. The atmosphere, I think it's Ridley Scott taking the tone of a film like Alien and putting it into a futuristic sci-fi LA in November 2019. Ooh. This is a really cool reimagining of the Blade Runner world. Kind of a perfect boy, honestly, when it comes to a sequel. Do I like it as much as other films on this list? I like them about the same amount. But as far as like a sequel goes, I think this thing exceeded expectations for the world building, the production design, the set design, the costume design, all of it. It has that same insane creativity that Ridley Scott had with his early work and has continued to have, but like particularly with his famous early work, Alien and Blade Runner. It has that creativity to build world out. I think the only like critique I have is I wish the Vangelis skull stuck around. I wish Vangelis was able to do this one too, but whatever. You take what you can get. Next up, 2010, a sequel to 2001. Talked about it with John Lithgow. It's got some really good stuff in it. So it's a good boy. Absolutely. I mean, I didn't talk about it a lot. I might talk about it eventually in more depth, but John Lithgow episode. I talk about him in it. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I saw this yesterday. This is a weird one because, the first half of this film sets up this film so well. It's so interesting. And it's more than a horror film. It's got some comedic elements, but it's almost like a drama. It's like a mystery thriller. And then you get to the second half of the film, which is very much the Texas Chainsaw half. It just kind of starts to make no sense. The characters get kind of annoying to watch. Dennis Hopper, who is absolutely an asset in this film because it's during this period in his career where I think he couldn't get work. So he was doing stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. But that's some of his best stuff. He's doing really cool stuff in this movie. Just going around for the whole second half of the film, just buzzing stuff completely nonsensically. And then the family and Leatherface themselves, the actors are clearly chewing all the scenery. But yeah, I'd give this good. It is a good sequel for that first half. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Good sequel. I think it does like a reverse, where we don't just see the game come out into the world. We see the world go into the game. The characters get stuck. They become their own thing. It's its own idea. It's original. It's fun. Yeah, I honestly, I like it quite a bit. Good movie. And then the sequel wasn't that bad either. The sequel to this sequel. Yeah, wow. I don't know. It kind of impressed me. I think it was way funnier than it ought to be. Plus, I believe this is the one that has the Jonas brother in it as a reveal. And that's really fun. He actually plays a really great role. He's kind of like the Robin Williams character who's been like stuck in the game for a while, and that's a surprisingly good casting. I don't know, that was cool. Next up, Halloween 2. Really, really good boy. Really, it's an okay movie. I like it quite a bit. I actually like it more than the first Halloween because I think it is a really nice arc. I think you should be able to watch the first two Halloween movies as like one 3-hour movie, and then you actually get like this holistic arc of sorts. Because in the second one, some theories behind what it is. It's just theories. We never get it explained. It's just theories of what this might be, and it's a very fun, vague sort of mystery that we're dealing with, and it has a good conclusion in the hospital. So I think I love it. Check it out. Really good sequel. And next up, another sequel in the Halloween series, which technically counts as a sequel to Halloween, but it's like in a different cinematic universe. Halloween H2O, 20 years later. Average. Next up, Super Troopers 2. Average as well, you know? I think it does a lot of fun stuff that calls back to the original Super Troopers, which is kind of close to my heart. Takes place in Vermont. Let's go. But it doesn't have that kind of retro, off the wall, low budget charm that the first one did. I think it's just a bit more sanitary in the first one, a bit more of a predictable plot, and I think there's just less jokes. So I don't know. It's just lesser. I don't know. We got Slumber Party Massacre 2. Slumber Party Massacre is this weird horror B movie, I believe from either late 70s or early 80s. I can't recall what year it came out, but it's this really surprisingly fantastic take on a horror movie, particularly in the Halloween vein of household horror, which I talked about with Amityville Horror, which was one of the first ones to ever do it. It's like Halloween and Amityville kind of started this household horror genre, micro genre. I think Slumber Party Massacre almost perfects it. I think it's really well done. It does so many inventive things with the horror genre, which is not a genre I'm like super into, but I always find myself talking about on this show. And that one's great. Slumber Party Massacre 2 sucks. It's really bad. It is just there is this certain lack of originality and just utter annoyance that comes with watching this movie. But let's move on. Just don't watch it. It's all I can say. All of it's so weird. There's the dude with the guitar doing the. Anyways, we are here, number 22 of this 222 tier list for sequels, and we're talking about High School Musical 2, which is it's good. It's good. As a sequel goes, it's. I feel like I've seen a sequel like this before, wherein the second one, it's like The Last Jedi, where like the second one's kind of different, but the first and third feel more similar, because it's like the vacation movie. It is. It literally takes place during summer vacation, but it's interesting because it's called High School Musical, and the sequel doesn't even have the high school in it. It's just the high schoolers we've come to know and love in the first one, but on a resort. And they're dancing around the kitchen, and they're trying to have fun at the resort, but they keep having to work. And Zac Efron still hasn't kissed Vanessa. Yeah, oh, jeez. Yeah, overall, I think it's a good sequel. I don't like the film that much, but it's a good sequel to the first one. It takes those characters and recontextualizes them in a summer format, and I think it actually works pretty well. And the choreography's kind of fun. That is my sequel week, sequel tier list sequel. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Happy sequel week. I don't know when another episode will be coming out. Could be soon. It will at least be by the end of March for the Andes. Tune in. But yeah, got some fun stuff planned out. So until then, thank you for watching. And yeah, have an awesome rest of your week. See ya.